Everyone. Today I'm going to read to you chapter 13 and chapter 14 of Charlotte's Web. So chapter 13 is Good Progress. Far into the night, while the other creatures slept, Charlotte worked on her web. First, she ripped out a few of the orb lines near the center. She left the radical lines alone. They were needed for support. And as she worked, her 8 legs were a great help to her. So were her teeth. She loved to weave, and she was an expert at it. And when she was finished ripping things out, her web looked something like this. You see that picture there? You see? Almost looks like a wheel on a bike, huh? A spider can produce several kinds of thread. She uses a dry, tough thread for foundation lines, and she uses a sticky thread for her snare lines. Those are the ones that catch and hold insects. Charlotte decided to use her dry thread for writing the new message. If I write the word terrific with sticky thread, she thought, every bug that comes along will get stuck in it and spoil the effect. Now let's see. The first letter is T for terrific. Charlotte climbed to the top point of the left side of the web. Swinging her spinsters into position, she attached the thread and dropped down. And as she dropped, it's gonna happen sometimes. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, sorry about that. And anyway, as she dropped, her tubes went into action, and she let out the thread. At the bottom, she attached the thread, and this formed the upright part of the letter T. Charlotte wasn't satisfied, however. She climbed up and she made another attachment right next to the first, and she carried that line down, so she had a double line instead of a single line. This why it will show up better with double lines. So she climbed back up. She moved over about an inch to the left, touched her spinsters to the web, and carried the line across to the right, forming the top of the T. And she repeated that and made that double too. Oh my goodness, her left legs were so busy. And now for the letter E. Charlotte got so interested in her work that she began to talk to herself, as though to cheer herself on. If you'd been sitting quietly in the barn cellar that evening, you would have heard something like this. Now for the R. Up we go, attach, descend. Pay out line, woo, attach, good. Up you go, repeat, attach, descend. Pay out line, whoa, girl, steady now. Attach, climb, attach. Over to the right, pay out line, attach. Now right and down and swing and loop around and around. Now into the left, attach, climb, repeat. Okay, easy, keep those lines together. Now then, out and down for the leg of the R. Pay out line, whoa, attach, ascend, repeat. Good girl. And so, talking to herself, the spider worked at her difficult task. When it was completed, she felt hungry, so she ate a small bug that she'd been saving. And then she slept. The next morning, Wilbur arose and he stood beneath the web, and he breathed in the morning air into his lungs. Drops of dew catching the sun made the web stand out clearly. And when Lurvy arrived with breakfast, here was the handsome pig, and over him, woven neatly in block letters, was the word terrific. Another miracle. Lurvy rushed and called Mr. Zuckerman, and Mr. Zuckerman rushed and called Mrs. Zuckerman, and Mrs. Zuckerman ran to the phone and called the Arbles. And the Arbles climbed into their truck, and they hurried over. So there's the picture. Isn't that awesome? Wilbur looked so proud. Everyone stood at the pig pen and stared at the web and read the word over and over, while Wilbur, who felt terrific, stood quietly, swelling out his chest and swinging his snout from side to side. Terrific, breathed Zuckerman in joyful admiration. Edith, you better phone the reporter on the Weekly Chronicle and tell him what has happened. He'll want to know about this. He'll want to bring a photographer. There isn't a pig in the whole state that has a terrific pig as ours. News spread. People who journeyed to see Wilbur when he was some pig came back again to see him now that he was terrific. That afternoon, when Mr. Zuckerman went to milk the cows and clean out the tie-ups, he was still thinking about what a wondrous pig he owned. Lurvy, he said, There is to be no more cow manure thrown into that pig pen. I have a terrific pig, and I want that pig to have clean, bright straw every day for his bedding. Understand?" "Yes, sir," said Lurvy. "Furthermore," said Mr. Zuckerman, "I want you to start building a crate for Wilbur. I have decided to take the pig to the county fair on September the 6th. Make that crate large and paint in make it green and paint it with gold letters." "Well, what should the letters say?" asked Lurvy. "They should say Zuckerman's Famous Pig." Lurvy picked up a pitchfork, walked away to get clean straw. Having such an important pig was going to mean plenty of extra work, he could see that. Below the apple orchard at the end of the path was the dump where Mr. Zuckerman threw all sorts of trash and stuff nobody wanted anymore. And here in a small clearing, hidden by some trees and wild raspberry bushes, was a pile of old bottles and empty tin cans, dirty rags, bits of metal, broken bottles, broken hinges, broken springs, dead batteries, and last month's magazines. Templeton knew the dump, and he really liked it. There were good hiding places there, excellent cover for a rat, and there was usually a tin can with some food still clinging on the inside. Templeton was down there now, rummaging around, and when he returned to the barn, he carried in his mouth an advertisement that he tore from a crumpled magazine. "How's this?" he asked, showing it to Charlotte. "It says crunchy. Crunchy would be a good word to write in your web." The wrong idea," said Charlotte. "Couldn't be worse. We don't want Zuckerman to think Wilbur's crunchy. He might start thinking about crisp, crunchy bacon and tasty ham. That would put ideas in his head. We must advertise Wilbur's noble qualities, not his tastiness. Get another word, please, Templeton." Oh, the rat looked disgusted. But he sneaked away to the dump, and he was back in a while with a crisp strip of cotton cloth. "How's this?" he said. "It's a label off an old shirt." Charlotte looked at the label, and it said pre-shrunk. "I'm sorry, Templeton," she said, "but pre-shrunk is out of the question. We want Zuckerman to think Wilbur is nicely filled up and out, not all shrunk up. I'll have to ask you to try again." "What do you think I am, a messenger boy?" grumbled the rat. "I'm not going to spend all my time chasing down to the dump after advertising material." "Just once more, please," said Charlotte. "I'll tell you what I'll do," said Templeton. "I know where there's a package of soap flakes in the woodshed, and it has writing on it. I'll bring you a piece of the package." He climbed the rope and hung on the wall and disappeared through a hole in the ceiling. When he came back, he had a strip of blue and white cardboard in his teeth. "There," he said. "How's that?" Charlotte read the words, "with new, radiant action." "What does that mean?" asked Charlotte. She never used soap flakes in her whole life. "How should I know?" said Templeton. "You asked for words, and I brought 'em. I suppose the next thing you want me to do is get a dictionary." Together they studied the soap ad. "With new radiant action," repeated Charlotte slowly. "Wilbur!" she called. Wilbur, who was asleep in the straw, jumped up. "Run around," said Charlotte. "I want to see you in action, to see if you're radiant." Wilbur raced to the end of the yard and back again faster, said Charlotte. And Wilbur galloped back. His skin shone. His tail had a fine, tight curl to it. "Jump in the air," cried Charlotte, and Wilbur jumped as high as he could. "Keep your knees straight and touch the ground with your ears," cried Charlotte. Can you see that picture there? He's so cute jumping around. Wilbur obeyed. "Do a backflip with a half twist in it," cried Charlotte. And Wilbur went over backwards, writhing and twisting as he went. "Okay, Wilbur," said Charlotte. "You can go back to sleep." "Okay, Templeton. The soap ad will do, I guess. I'm not sure Wilbur's action is exactly radiant, but it's interesting." "Actually," said Wilbur, "I feel radiant." "Do you?" said Charlotte, looking at him with affection. "Well, you're a good little pig, and radiant you shall be. I'm in this thing pretty deep now. I might as well go the limit." Tired from his romp, Wilbur laid down in the clean straw, and he closed his eyes. The straw seemed scratchy, not as comfortable as cow manure, which was always delightfully soft to lay in. So he pushed the straw to the side, and he stretched out in the manure. Wilbur sighed. It had been a busy day, his first day of being terrific. Dozens of people had visited his yard during the afternoon, and He had had to stand and pose, looking as terrific as he could, and now he was tired. Fern had arrived and seated herself quietly on the stool in the corner. "Tell me a story, Charlotte," said Wilbur as he lay down waiting for sleep to come. "Tell me a story." So Charlotte, although she too was tired, did what Wilbur wanted. "Once upon a time," she began, "I had a beautiful cousin who managed to build her web across a small stream. And one day a tiny fish leaped into the air and got tangled in the web. My cousin was very much surprised, of course. The fish was thrashing wildly. My cousin hardly dared tackle it, but she did. She swooped down and she threw great masses of wrapping material around the fish, who fought bravely to capture it." "Did she succeed?" asked Wilbur. "It was a never-to-be-forgotten battle," said Charlotte. "There was the fish, caught only by one fin, and his tail wildly thrashing and shining in the sun, and there was the web, sagging dangerously under the weight of the fish." "How much did the fish weigh?" asked Wilbur. "I don't know," said Charlotte. "There was my cousin, slipping in, dodging out, getting beaten mercifully over the head by the wildly thrashing fish. First she threw a left around the tail and the fish landed back, then a left to the tail and a right to the midsection and the fish landed back. Then she dodged to one side, threw a right and another right to the fin." "Then what happened?" "Nothing," said Charlotte. The fish lost the fight. My cousin wrapped it up so tight it couldn't budge." "Then what happened?" asked Wilbur. "Nothing," said Charlotte. "My cousin kept the fish for a while, and then when she got good and ready, she ate it." "Tell me another story," said Wilbur. So Charlotte told him about another cousin of hers who was an aeronaut. "What is an aeronaut?" said Wilbur. "A balloonist," said Charlotte. "My cousin used to stand on her head and let out enough thread to form a balloon, and then she'd let go and be lifted into the air and carried upward on the warm wind." "Is that true?" asked Wilbur. "Or are you just making it up?" "It's true," said Charlotte. "I have some very remarkable cousins. And now, Wilbur, it's time you went to sleep." "Sing something," begged Wilbur, closing his eyes. So Charlotte sang a lullaby while crickets chirped in the grass and the barn grew dark, and this was the song that she sang. "Sleep, sleep, my love, my only, deep, deep in the dung in the dark. Be not afraid and be not lonely. This is the hour when frogs and thrushes praise the world from the woods and the rushes. Rest from care, my one and only, deep in the dung in the dark." But Wilbur was already asleep when the song ended. Fern got up and she went home. Now we're on to chapter 14, Dr. Dorian. The next day was Saturday, and Fern stood at the kitchen sink drying the breakfast dishes as her mother washed them. Mrs. Arble worked silently. She hoped Fern would go out and play with other children instead of heading for the Zuckerman's barn just to sit and watch animals. "Charlotte is the best storyteller I've ever heard," said Fern, poking her dish towel into a cereal bowl. "Fern," said her mother sternly, "you must not invent things. You know spiders don't tell stories. Spiders can't talk." "Charlotte can," said Fern. "She doesn't talk very loud, but she talks." "What kind of story did she tell?" asked Mrs. Arble. "Well," began Fern, "she told us about a cousin of hers who caught a fish in her web. Don't you think that's fascinating?" "Fern, how could a fish get caught in a spider's web?" said Mrs. Arble. "You know it couldn't happen. You're making this up." "Oh, it happened all right," said Fern. "Charlotte never fibs. This cousin of hers built a web across the stream, and it happened." "Fern," snapped her mother, "stop it. Stop inventing these wild tales." "I'm not inventing," said Fern. "I'm telling you the facts." "What really happened?" asked her mother. "Charlotte's cousin won when she wrapped the fish up and it ate him when she was good and ready. Spiders have to eat, you know, the same as us." "Yeah, I suppose they do," said Mrs. Arable vaguely. "Charlotte had another cousin who's a balloonist. She stands on her head, lets out lots of line, and she's carried aloft in the wind. Mother, wouldn't you simply love to do that?" "Yeah, I kind of would, come to think of it," said Mrs. Arble. "But Fern, darling, I wish you would play outside today instead of going to Uncle Homer's barn. Find some playmates, do something nice outdoors. You're just spending way too much time in that barn, and it's not good for you to be alone so much." "Alone?" said Fern. "Alone? My best friends are in the barn cellar. It's a very sociable place, not at all lonely. Fern disappeared after a while, walking down the road toward Zuckerman's. Her mother dusted the sitting room as she worked. She kept thinking about Fern. It just didn't seem natural for a little girl to be so interested in animals. Finally, Mrs. Arble made up her mind. She would pay a call on old Dr. Dorian and ask his advice. When she got in the car and drove to his office, which was in the village. Dr. Dorian had a thick beard. He was glad to see Mrs. Arble and gave her a comfortable chair to sit in. It's about Fern, she explained. Fern spends entirely too much time in the Zuckerman's barn. It does not seem normal. She sits on a milk stool in the corner of the barn cellar near the pig pen, and she watches animals hour after hour, and she just sits and listens. Dr. Dorian leaned back and closed his eyes. How enchanting, he said. It must be real nice and quiet down there. Homer has sheep, hasn't he? Yes, said Mrs. Arble, but it all started with that pig. We let Fern raise him on a bottle, and she calls him Wilbur. Homer bought the pig, and ever since it left our place, Fern has been going to her uncle's to be near it. So here she is. I don't know if you can see that. There's Mrs. Arble, and she's talking to the Dr. Dorian. I've been hearing things about that pig, said Dr. Dorian, opening his eyes. They say he's quite a pig. Have you heard about the words that appeared in the web? Asked Mrs. Arble. Yes, said the doctor. Well, do you understand it? Said Mrs. Arble. Understand what? Do you understand how there could be any writing in a spider's web? Oh, no, said Dr. Dorian. I don't understand it at all. But for that matter, I don't understand how a spider learned to spin a web in the first place. When the words appeared, everyone said it was a miracle. But nobody pointed out that the web itself is a miracle. What's miraculous about a spider's web? Said Mrs. Arble. I don't see why you say a web is a miracle. It's just a web. Did you ever try to spin one? Asked Dr. Dorian. Well, Mrs. Arble, she just kind of shifted uneasily in her chair. Well, no, she replied, but I can crochet a doily and I can knit socks. Sure, said the doctor, but somebody taught you, didn't they? Well, my mother taught me. Who taught the spider? A young spider knows how to spin a web without any instructions from anybody. Don't you think that's a miracle? I suppose so, said Mrs. Arble. I never looked at it that way before. Still, I don't understand how those words got into that web. I just don't understand it, and I don't like what I don't understand. None of us do, said Dr. Dorian, sighing. I'm a doctor. Doctors are supposed to understand everything, but I don't understand everything, and I don't intend to let it worry me. Mrs. Arble fidgeted. Fern says the animals talk to each other. Dr. Dorian, do you believe animals talk? I never heard anyone say any of them say anything, he replied, but that doesn't prove anything. It is quite possible that an animal has spoken civilly to me, and I didn't even catch the remark because I wasn't paying attention. Children pay attention better than grown-ups. If Fern says the animals in Zuckerman's barn talk, I'm quite ready to believe her. Perhaps if people talk less, animals could talk more. People are incessant talkers. I can give you my word on that. Well, I do feel a little better about Fern, said Mrs. Arble. You don't think I need to worry about her? Does she look well? Asked the doctor. Oh, yes. Is her appetite good? Oh, yes. Does she sleep well at night? Oh, yes. Then don't worry, said the doctor. Do you think she'll ever start thinking about something besides pigs and sheep and geese and spiders? How old is Fern? Asked the doctor. 8. Well, said Dr. Dorian, I think she'll always love animals, but I doubt that she will spend her entire life in Homer Zuckerman's barn cellar. What about boys? Does she know about boys? She knows Henry Fussy, said Mrs. Arble. Dr. Dorian closed his eyes and thought, Henry Mussey. Remarkable. Well, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Let Fern associate with her friends in the barn if she wants to. I would say offhand that spiders and pigs are fully as interesting as Henry Fussy. Yet I predict that the day will come when even Henry will drop some chance remark that catches Fern's attention. It's amazing how children change from year to year. How's Avery? He asked. Oh, Avery? Avery's always fine. Of course, he gets into poison ivy, and he gets stung by wasps and bees, and he brings frogs and snakes home, and he breaks everything he puts his hands on, but he's fine. Oh, good, said the doctor. Mrs. Arble said goodbye, and thanked Dr. Dorian very much for his advice. She felt greatly relieved. That's where we're going to end for tonight. I hope you all have a great night's sleep, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow night. We'll pick up 2 more chapters. Good night.